Hey everyone, and welcome to What If Disney World. I'm Stevie.
And I'm Amy.
And today we're going to be sharing a ton of tips you should know for your first Disney cruise. And if you missed part one of our video, we'll be sure to link it below, because we discussed tips for planning, packing, and checking in that video. But today we are talking tips for arrival day at Port Canaveral, tips for while you're on board your cruise, specifically the Disney Wish for us, and tips for cruising with little kids.
I learned a lot of these tips the hard way, and so I want to share them with you so that you can have the best possible first cruise. And I thought it would be helpful to walk you through a bit of our arrival day with some timing of things and some tips along the way so you can know what to expect. So to start off, we'll talk about tips for getting on the ship. This is specific if you are driving to the port, because that's what we did. If you're using Disney transportation, then you really don't have to worry about port arrival time. They pick you up at the Disney resort and they bring you there. But if you are arriving to Port Canaveral by your own vehicle, or you're getting some kind of Uber or private transportation, then you would arrive around your port arrival time. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But tip number one is to bring cash and go ahead and have it out and ready to tip the porters when they take your bag. So when you pull up to the front of the building, the porters will start unloading your luggage, and it's nice to tip them when they do that. And it all happens really fast. So just go ahead and have your money out when you pull up to the front of the terminal. Tip number two, Port Canaveral's line to get to the terminal was really long and longer than we expected. So we ended up driving from Orlando and getting there about 30 minutes before our port arrival time. And we had to wait that long in the line just to get up to the front of the building for the porters to take our bag. And then there was some kind of snafu with parking in the parking garage, and it took like 30 more minutes to park the car and then for Stevie to come and meet us outside of the terminal. What I didn't know is that you can actually get to the terminal before your port arrival time. You just can't actually enter the building before your port arrival time, but you could get there and drop your bag off and park before, because they had signs out in front of the entrance to the cruise terminal with the different port arrival time windows. And they had people kind of lining up and queuing up at their respective port arrival time. And then when the clock struck 11:30, then they let the 11:30 group go in. So if I had to do it again, I would definitely get there earlier next time, maybe even an hour before my port arrival time, to allow for all those extra things, because you can always just wait right outside. Tip number three, you cannot bring liquid into the terminal, kind of like an airport. So we had filled up our refillable water bottles and our kids' milk and sippy cups with juice, and we had to dump it all out in the drain in front of the terminal. You can't bring any liquid inside with you. So just know that, and don't fill up your cups before you go to the cruise terminal. Tip number four, when you get on the ship or even at the terminal, you can go ahead and connect to the Wi-Fi, and you can start looking through the Cruise Navigator app and looking at where you're set to be at dinner, or looking through the activities and the itinerary for the cruise. And you can go through and heart the activities that look like fun to you or that you want to do. And the Cruise Navigator app will send you a notification 15 minutes before that activity. So if you get to the cruise terminal early, you can connect to that Wi-Fi and go ahead and start working on your favorites list. So that's really fun. Tip number five, when you get on board, they're going to announce your name when you walk on, which is really fun. And then you go into the main grand hall of the ship and stick around for a minute. They hand out wishing wands, and then on a rotation every few minutes, a princess and prince come out on the balcony and wave to everyone. And there's a little wishing ceremony that's really neat and special, and the grand hall lights up. It's really cool. Tip number 6, and right when you board the ship is a really good time if you didn't get that Palo brunch or special experience that you wanted to book before the cruise. Go to the designated guest services or dining area and see if they have any openings. A lot of times there are openings and you can snag that right when you get on the ship. Tip number 7 is where to eat lunch when you get on the ship. So everyone will typically head to the buffet, which on most ships is called Cabanas, but on the Wish is called Marceline Market. Stevie went up there with our youngest and it was super crowded. So a tip that we have is to look in the app and see which sit-down restaurant is serving lunch when you get on board the ship. For the day we arrived, it was Arendelle, and you can go and be seated and have a nice sit-down lunch, and it's not crowded and it's not stressful. It might take a little bit more time, but it was a really nice experience to start the cruise. If you do go to Marceline Market, here's a tip for where you can find seating if it's super crowded. When you walk into Marceline Market, there's a hand washing station, and then you can turn and go through the buffet line. At the end of the line, there might not be any seats over in that area. So if you walk back towards where the hand washing stations and the front of the buffet line is, there's an area towards the windows of the ship that's kind of tucked away. So you can walk in there and there's usually seating in there. Tip number 8 is to consider whether you might want to swim on your arrival day, because if you do, you want to pack that swimsuit for everybody in your day bag or in your carry-on, because you're not going to have your checked bag that the porters took until a little bit later in the afternoon. Now, we found that we didn't really have time to swim, and I'll tell you what all we did instead. But there were people that were in there swimming and riding the Aqua Mouse. So that's up to you. If you think you might want to, go ahead and pack your swimsuit in your day bag so you don't regret it. Tip number 9, this is a really good time to do the open house for the kids club. So when you first get on the ship, there'll be a time in your Cruise Navigator app that you can look and see when they have the kids club open house. And this is one of the only times that adults can go and see the full kids club. So you can walk through the kids club with your kids and see all the different areas inside there. Let them get comfortable with the kids club and get excited about going back. And you can also get them set up. They have special wristbands that they get for the kids club that are kind of like magic bands. And you can go ahead and get that all set up and get them registered. And you can also register your little ones for the nursery if you need to. Tip number 10. So around 2 p.m. is when our room was ready and we were able to get in. And shortly after that, our luggage arrived at our room. Again, make sure that you've packed everything that you would need up until that point, like medications in your day bag, and even for beyond that, because it's not a guarantee that your checked bag is going to be there that early. It might be delayed even a little bit more. Our bag was there around 2 o'clock, and so we were able to kind of unpack and organize our room a little bit. And then it was time for the mustard drill. So tip 11 is to not be late to the mustard drill. This is a mandatory thing that everybody has to go to, and we didn't know as a first-time cruiser where to go for this. So if you don't know where to go, you look on the back of your stateroom door and it will tell you what deck to go to and what area to go to. On your key to the world card, which is like your room key and your account key, it will tell you what assembly station you're at. And there's cast members all over the boat that can kind of help direct you where you need to go. And then tip number 12 is to go directly from the mustard drill to the deck for the sail away party. That's what we did. Maybe we were a little bit early than we needed to be, but we were able to get a really great spot. And my tip would be to go up to deck 12 and watch the sail away party from above, because you have an unobstructed view of the stage. And the sail away party was super fun, lots of characters, lots of excitement. And then there's a countdown, and that's when you sail away. So it's the perfect way to start your cruise. Highly recommend going to that. All right, moving on for tips while you are on the boat. Tip number 13, if you are prone to motion sickness, consider going ahead and taking something before the sail away. Once the boat starts to move, you might start feeling it. Talk to your doctor about what would be best for you, but consider going ahead and taking something early. Tip number 14, once you sail away, put your phone on airplane mode. This will help prevent any crazy international charges that your phone company might do. Tip number 15, we used the free Wi-Fi on board and we didn't pay anything extra, and we thought that this was really nice to unplug a bit. We were able to send iMessages to one another and even to our family. We just weren't able to send pictures or videos, and we weren't able to do things like get on Instagram, but that was okay because it was really nice to just spend time together as a family. And the really great tip is that you can stream Disney movies or TV from the Navigator app. This was a lifesaver during dinner time to entertain our little ones. So to do this, just go to live stream Stateroom TV and you're able to pick the movie that you want to do. And that's free on the Wi-Fi on the Wish. Tip number 16, there is a chat feature or a message through the Cruise Navigator app, but we didn't get notifications when we would send each other a message, so make sure you check the app frequently, but also you can iMessage as well. Tip number 17, you can also use the app to check the weather and where the ship is. That was a really cool feature, and that's on the Stateroom TV too. I didn't know that until the last day. Tip number 18, the elevators on the Disney Wish are kind of unusual, and some of them do not go to all the floors. So some of the elevators do not go to deck 13 and 12, but you can look at the sign above each elevator and see what deck it goes to. Tip number 19, for some character meets, especially the really popular ones, you might need to line up early. I'd say maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes early should be sufficient, but some of them do start to get really long lines. Tip number 20, if you are able to get the Royal Gathering, be prepared that it might take a little bit longer than you think. So with the Royal Gathering, you get like a set appointment time to go and meet the 5 princesses in the Grand Hall. But what we didn't realize is that we had to wait like 30 minutes to get through the line. So we showed up at our time for the Royal Gathering, and it was a really long line. And I asked the cast member, and she said that yes, that's pretty typical to wait about 30 minutes to meet the princesses. So just be prepared for that in your planning. Tip number 21, you can tip for room service via the receipts, and it charges to your account, so you don't have to have cash readily on hand. Tip number 22, for the shows, we got there about 20 minutes early and we sat on the upper level of the theater when we found that we were able to easily find a seat. There are booster seats for the kids, but our kids didn't need them on the upper level. I don't know if you might need them on the lower level, but know that they do have booster seats. Tip number 23, I will warn you that it can be kind of hard to find a seat sometimes with some of the popular activities. Like we tried to go to a trivia and we were unable to find a seat getting there close to the time that it was starting. If you really want to do something, I think you should show up 15 or maybe 20 minutes early to be sure that you get a seat. Tip number 24, did you know you can bring your refillable popcorn bucket from the park and get popcorn for cheaper? Yes, they charge at the theater for popcorn, so be prepared for that. But you are able to bring your popcorn bucket on board and get that refilled at the theater if that's something that you would want to do. Tip number 25, buy merch early. It sells out. And the shops don't open until you are over international waters. That's something that I didn't know was going to happen. So this actually took quite some time on our first night, and it didn't open until we were close to dinner time. So by the time we got out of dinner and tried to go in the shop, it was packed full of people, and I didn't even see any of the 25th anniversary merch. Tip number 26, I think, is really, really important. I would say manage your expectations. I didn't really realize how crowded the ship was going to feel. I thought that it would not feel as crowded as the Disney parks, but in fact, a lot of times the ship felt more crowded than Disney World feels to me. Crowd levels can be really high, and I think if you have that expectation, it can help you have a better experience if you go in knowing that it's probably going to feel quite crowded. Tip number 27, know that you may be seated with another family at dinner. You can make a request before the cruise to be seated at a table alone, but that request is not always able to be honored. And so you might be sitting with another family. So just be prepared for that. Tip number 28, get a coffee fanatic card to get your 6th coffee free. So drip coffee is free on board. You can get it via room service or at Marceline Market. But if you want a fancy coffee like a latte, you have to go to either Cove Cafe in the adult only area or one of the bars like the Wishing Star Cafe or Enchanted Sword Cafe or the Coffee Bar by Marceline Market. But if you buy 5 and get your card stamped while you're on board, you get the 6th coffee free. So a little perk. Tip number 29. You can book what's called a placeholder on your cruise. So if you are enjoying your cruise, you're loving it, you know that you want to take another cruise in the next 2 years, you can go on the Disney Cruise Navigator app and place a deposit and get 10% off your next cruise, which could save a lot of money. Tip number 30, if you buy the photo package, which I would recommend, by the way, be sure to stop by and get the instructions on how to view them and download them. They'll tell you that on the ship. So be sure you go and do that and take a picture of the instructions on your phone so you can remember once you get home. Tip number 31, if you are doing Palo Brunch, know that it can take 1.5 to 2 hours. And this was with our server being mindful to keep things moving because we had kids in the nursery and the kids club. I think it could take longer if you wanted a more relaxed pace or if you wanted to eat more food than we did. Our server specifically asked us if we had a time limit, which was really nice, and he kept things moving along quickly. But just know that it might take 1.5 to 2 hours at the minimum. So that could help you plan for your nursery or your kids club if you need to plan for that. Tip number 32, when it's time to disembark, you can choose 2 ways to leave the ship. You can leave your checked luggage out the night before, and then you have a group called after breakfast and you all go out together as your group. Or you can do what we did, which is called the express walk-off. So we kept all of our luggage in our room and we walked off with our checked bags and our carry-on bags at 7 a.m. So the doors opened to walk off of the ship at 7 a.m. We got through customs really fast. You just need to have your passport out and ready for that. And then we drove back to Orlando, and just to give you an idea of time frame, we were at the beach club by 8:30 and we were walking into Epcot at 9:15, which was really amazing. Okay, now I'm going to give some quick tips for traveling on a cruise with kids. Tip number 33, childcare in the kids club is for ages 3 to 12, but they have to be potty trained, and not just potty trained, but completely independently potty trained, like able to go to the stall and do it all on their own. If they are age 3 or under and they're not completely potty trained at age 3, then they would have to go to the nursery. And no, for the nursery, you have to reserve a time ahead of time, and there's limited capacity and they might book up. And know that you can cancel or change it 4 hours in advance and not be penalized. But also know that if you have reserved a time block and you pick the kid up early from the nursery, you will still get charged for the full time block that you had reserved. Tip number 34, know that you can request special things for your kids for your stateroom. They will bring you a diaper genie, you can have a pack and play, you can have bed rails, or you can request a booster seat or a high chair at dinner. You can do that ahead of time, or you can talk to your room attendant when you're there. Tip number 35, don't be afraid of the veranda rooms. So I didn't know how secure these would be, and it made me a little bit nervous, but I'm so glad that we got a room with a veranda. There's a lock that's super high on the door that there's no way a 3-year-old is going to reach. So don't be scared of that. Tip number 36, maybe consider bringing an umbrella stroller. I say that kind of jokingly because we used the umbrella stroller when we got there to the terminal, and we found it helpful when we were leaving the ship, but we didn't use it at all on the ship. Everything is really relatively close to each other. The elevators can be a long wait, so it's usually more efficient and faster to take the stairs. And so we ended up not using the umbrella stroller at all. I definitely wouldn't have any kind of a bigger stroller because you really don't have room in your stateroom to store it. So if anything, bring a little umbrella stroller, but you might not even really need that. Tip number 37. Know that dinner takes a long time and be prepared for that with kids. So each rotational dinner took us about 1.5 to 2 hours. So you can go ahead and order the kids' food when you sit down and ask that that be brought out early if they're hungry. Some people take the kids to the kids' club after they eat and then they come back and enjoy dinner. We didn't do that, but we did have some activities for them. And we had the streaming of the Disney movies on demand through the Navigator app, like I talked about earlier. That was a lifesaver. And tip number 38, know that there's some things that are going to exclude children of certain ages. What I mean by that is, for example, the splash pad excluded our oldest child. She was not able to go on the splash pad because she was too old. But if a toddler is not potty trained, then they're not allowed in the bigger pools. So there might be some kind of difficulty finding things on the cruise ship that your whole family could do all together. I will say, if your Disney cruise has a character dance party listed on the activities in the app, be sure that you make that and do that. That was one of the highlights of the cruise for us.
Well, there you have it. 38 tips to help you have a great first cruise. We hope these tips are helpful to you in planning your trip. If you enjoy this content, please hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to check out our other tips videos that we have. Until next time, keep dreaming.